What's up, guys? It's chapter 21, part B. So we're going to start with a little bit of geography, and this is going to help us understand World War I. We'll first talk about the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which you see right here. We also need to identify the Russian Empire, which is right there, and Serbia. The next country that you see here is Bosnia, right there. So Bosnia was actually an independent country until 1908, when the Austro-Hungarian Empire takes over it. Now, Bosnia was allied with Serbia and Russia. So when the Austrian-Hungarian Empire takes over Bosnia, neither Serbia nor Austria really like it. The heir to the throne of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, his name was Franz Ferdinand, which is that guy right here and this guy right here. Now, he decides to take a trip down to Sarajevo, which was the capital at that point of Bosnia. When he's down there, there's a Serbian nationalist, a 19-year-old individual whose name is Gavrilo Princip. Gavrilo Princip, which is this guy right here with the gun, he does not like that Austria-Hungary took over Serbia or Bosnia. And so when Franz Ferdinand is out there giving a speech, he shoots, Gavrilo Princip shoots Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie. And that is the spark that ignites World War I. Because Austria-Hungary believes that Serbia was responsible for the assassination. So Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. Since Russia was allied with Serbia, then Russia declares war on Austria-Hungary. Since Germany was allied with Austria-Hungary, Germany declared war both on Russia and France, because France was also allied with Russia. So what we see here is a two-war front. The Eastern Front, which is the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians fighting the Russians, and the Western Front, which for the most part is the Germans fighting the French. However, in order to be able to attack France, Germany needs to invade Belgium. Now, when that happens, when Germany invades Belgium, Great Britain then declares war on Germany. And so we have all these countries that are declaring war on each other. And what you need to understand is the Triple Alliances, or what it's also called the Central Powers. The Triple Alliances are a combination of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. They form an alliance and they fight the Triple Entente. The Triple Entente are formed of Russia, the United Kingdom or Britain, and France. And these are our major players during World War I. So in Europe, it seems like the entire continent is at war with each other. Meanwhile, back in the US, Wilson urged US citizens to remain neutral. Because there were Irish immigrants who were against British rule, there were German immigrants who would have supported Germany. And so by joining one side and not the other, the United States would actually divide itself even further. So this political cartoon shows the United States being dormant while the conflict is going on abroad. The US is staying neutral. And again, you see Uncle Sam here being kind of upset that the United States is neutral. So while the United States is doing nothing, we do have a major war going on across the ocean in Europe. So certain events take place that eventually gets the United States involved into the war. We'll start in April 1915. World War I starts in 1914. Well, when the war begins, the United States is able to ship weapons to both sides, the Allies and the Entente. And that's making the United States very profitable. Well, Britain wants to stop that. So they launch a blockade. They're pretty much what the British do. They stop weapons produced in the US bound for Germany, and Britain then cuts off the weapon supplies that Germany is receiving. In response, Germany comes up with a new weapon, what becomes known as the U-boats. Basically, these are German submarines. On April 15, one of these German U-boats sank a British liner called the Lusitania. The problem with the US was that there was 128 Americans on board this ship. And so now Americans start to see the Germans as evil because they are killing Americans. But it was to, in essence, fair game because those Americans volunteered to join the Lusitanian. Now, they were not going in for combat. They were going in there for a cruise. But the Germans did not distinguish between civilian ships and warships. So the Germans sunk that ship. Wilson responded by threatening to break diplomatic ties with Germany, and Germany agreed to stop shooting at passenger and merchant ships. So at least for a while, Germany was not shooting at some of these ships. Now, the situation escalates. In 1917, we have what becomes known as the Zimmermann Note. This is a telegraph sent from Germany to Mexico. And in it, Germany urged Mexico to join the Allies. As a gratitude, Germany would then help Mexico regain control of the land lost in the U.S. to the U.S. in 1948. And then Germany resumes unrestricted warfare submarines. So Germany goes back to sinking all these submarines without any notice. These are part of the major reasons why the United States gets involved. So just to kind of have some visuals here. So this could be considered a German U-boat. And these could be considered merchant ships that Germany was sinking. It could be the Lusitanian, it could be other, because Germany did start sinking other ships. When the Lusitanian was sunk, Britain issued a propaganda, this particular one, that showed an American female being drowned and her baby because of Germans sunk the Lusitanian. And that was to encourage the United States to get involved. The Zimmermann Note that I was talking about, here's a visual representation of it. This individual, which is kind of depicted as Satan, is also the German Empire. This individual here is considered Mexico. And basically what Germany is asking Mexico to do is to join Germany. And if they do so, then Germany will help Mexico regain this land, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, that Mexico lost in the Mexican-American War. So because of these three reasons, the sinking of the Lusitanian, the unrestricted warfare by German U-boats, and the Zimmermann Note, on April 2nd, Wilson declares or asks Congress to declare war on Germany. And you see the newspaper here, American ships sunk without warning, American lives lost. And so eventually, the United States does enter the war on the side of the Entente, joining Britain, France, and actually eventually Italy. Now, the U.S. gets involved in what becomes known as the Great War. And for the most part, people thought that the United States was only going to help financially and with munitions. But by May 1917, Congress issues a draft. And that is a particular example of how the government gets involved in people's private lives. The government is not telling you what to do. And they're telling young men to enlist in the war. And thousands of young men eager for adventure enlist in the war. On November 1917, Russia pulled out of the war because they are now engaged in a civil war, or what becomes known as the Bolshevik Revolution, because Russia wants to become a communist country. So now Russia is out and Germany is able to focus all its defenses on the Western Front. By May 1918, Germany was within 50 miles of Paris, and the Americans were still not supporting the Entente. So the Americans, seeing how desperate the situation was, they finally joined the fighting. On July 1918, the Americans, along with the other allies, halted the German advance. And 5 months later, on November 11, 1918, Germany signs an armistice, ceasing all hostilities and all conflict. But that is not what ends the war. What ends the war, officially ends the war, is the Treaty of Versailles, which is signed 6 months later, more or less May 1919. The Treaty of Versailles is led by US, Britain, France, and Italy. Russia and Germany were left out of the negotiation tables, which becomes a huge, huge problem. But in essence, this is a Treaty of Versailles. First of all, it created 9 nations in the Western Europe that became known as the buffer zone, so that if there was another conflict, the Western European powers were able to defend themselves. These 9 nations were now supposed to determine for themselves their new type of government. Germany was blamed for starting the war according to the Treaty of Versailles. All of the colonies that Germany had in Africa were divided among Britain and France. There was also reparations. Basically, what that means was that Germany was supposed to pay $33 million to the winners. It also limited Germany's armed forces. It said that they couldn't have a major armed force. The codes that Germany used to build its army was transferred to the Allies. And then the main thing that Wilson wanted was what becomes known as the League of Nations. The League of Nations is an international peace organization that was supposed to settle differences between two countries and prevent war. And the League of Nations was going to have a lot of powers. Now, that was Wilson's ideas. They met in Versailles, which is in France. And first of all, Wilson needed to convince the other countries, Britain, France, and Italy, that this was a good treaty. And so those countries needed to sign it. But Wilson also needed to convince Congress to approve the Treaty of Versailles. And we'll see what happens. This is a political cartoon that shows the big four. Again, the big four are France, Britain, Italy, and the US. They came up with the Peace Treaty of Versailles. And these are the peace terms. This individual was supposed to represent Germany. And they are shoving the Treaty of Versailles down the throat of the Germans. The Germans did not agree to these terms, but they were forced to accept them. Otherwise, Germany would cease to disappear. And this is why the German people resented the Treaty of Versailles. In terms of the League of Nations, this is Uncle Sam representing the US. Wilson, remember, was the one that came out with the League of Nations. The League of Nations was supposed to bridge the difference between the different European countries. And you see the keystone here is missing. The United States never joined the League of Nations. And the reason was because the Republicans believed that by joining the League of Nations, they was going to deprive them of their war powers. And the Republicans did not want to yield their war powers to a League of Nations, a nation that would, in essence, be telling the United States what to do. So when the League of Nations eventually comes into Congress, a lot of Republicans are hostile to it. Wilson, who was a Democrat, he goes on a campaign asking people to push the representatives to join the League of Nations. Now, he suffers a stroke during his campaign, and he eventually dies in 1924. And with Wilson's death, also dies the hopes of the United States joining the League of Nations. The United States seemed to favor isolationism and to stay away from European affairs. And that was one reason why they refused to join the League of Nations. However, the United States did get involved in Latin America and in the Far East, such as China and the Philippines, as explained in Chapter 21, Part A. So, without the United States joining the League of Nations, the League of Nations proves to be a weak organization. Here in the home front, during World War I, women were very instrumental. Over 1 million women contribute to the war efforts in many ways. So in this picture, you see women joining in as nurses, and sometimes they help in the battlefields, putting their lives at risk. Women also knitted socks, gloves, jackets for the soldiers that were fighting. So that's another contribution that women did. The biggest contribution was women entered the workforce, working in industries, creating munitions, or this one is a woman working in a naval shipyard, creating parts for a Navy airplane. So because of their contributions, women eventually pushed to help get the 19th Amendment ratified. And that is why they're able to gain that right, because of their contributions during World War I. But women help in other ways. At home, they help preserve food. They promoted food conservation. They distributed emergency relief funds and encouraged people to donate for the war effort. So women's contributions during World War I were essential for the United States to win the war.